Picking up the guitar for the first time can be a super fun, super exciting experience, but it can also be super overwhelming. There is just way too much information for you out there. At the end of the day, you want to be able to play what you want to play, am I right? The cool thing about the guitar is it's one of the most quickly rewarding instruments you can play. And I'm going to prove that to you right now by teaching you 6 basic guitar chords made ultra simple. All right? So let's go right into it. So these are basically 6 stripped down versions, for the most part, of common chords that when played in succession actually sound very musical and cool. I don't want to just sit here and teach you just random chords that you'll be able to play but not really apply to music. The cool thing about the chords you're going to be learning today is that when you play them all together, they sound fun and musical. So that way when you're practicing them, you're not just exercising, you're making music. So the first chord is a very, very, very simplified version of the G chord. All right, and it goes just like this. Really, really, really bare bones, stripped down version of the G chord, okay? The full G chord being this. But don't worry about that one right now. We're gonna start you off with this first chord, really simple, real basic. So basically what we're doing is we're just playing the bottom 3 strings, okay? The D string, B string, and E string, all right? And what we're doing is we're taking our 3rd finger, which by the way the fingers are numbered that I'll reference in this video is index finger is 1st finger, middle finger is 2nd finger, 3rd finger is ring finger, and 4th finger is pinky. All right, so we're gonna take our ring finger, our 3rd finger, and we're gonna press it on the 3rd fret, right? 1, 2, 3. 3rd fret of the guitar here. And that's it. That's literally all you're doing for this first chord. And then you're just going to be, with your pick, you're just going to downstroke those bottom 3 strings just in a nice, simple motion. And just let it ring out. That right there is a G chord, and it qualifies as a G chord because what makes up a chord is at least 3 or more notes. So we got our 3 right here. So boom. There's your G chord. You can literally, like within minutes of picking up the guitar, you'd be able to play that chord. Super simple, all right? The next chord is a G7 chord. Now, before you start to get freaked out by me throwing numbers next to letters with chords, you don't really need to know what it means to be a G7 chord. Just know that it's called the G7 chord. And I will tell you right now, 7 chords are typically nice transition chords. So they're just nice to go as an in-between from one chord to another. You play a 7 chord, it just kind of smoothly transitions into the next chord. And it's something that's used in a lot of music, particularly a lot of blues, folk music, country music, But the G7 chord goes like this. So same basic principle, but instead of using the 3rd fret here with our 3rd finger, we're taking our 1st finger and fretting the 1st fret of that high E string here. And that's using that same downward motion on those 3 strings. There's our G7 chord. So when you play them together, and when you hear the G7 chord, it almost sounds like it wants to go somewhere, right? Like I said, 7 chords are great for transitioning. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna transition to a C chord. Now, just as easily as it was to play the G7 chord, all we're going to need to do to play the C chord is to take our 1st finger here, hop it up 1 string so that we're on the B string here. Same fret though, 1st fret, literally just a boop, and same bottom 3 strings. That is a new chord right there. So with just that simple motion from G7 to C, we have now transitioned properly into that chord. So check this out. I'm going to play all 3 so far in succession to show you how G7 works as a nice transition chord. Right there, nice and easy, right? Now the next chord we're going to learn is a C7 chord, yet another transition chord because it just adds more to the mix when it comes to chord progressions, right? So the C7 chord goes like this. What we're going to do is we're going to keep our C shape, right? We're going to keep holding that, act as if your 1st finger is literally glued to that 1st fret. Then we're going to take our 3rd finger And we're going to reach over to the 3rd fret of the G string, which is the top of those bottom 3 strings that we're playing here. So it's that note right there, and the entire chord will sound like this. Sounds kind of funky by itself, but again, it plays as a great transition chord. So all 4 chords now together. And you might have guessed it by now, since C7 is a transition chord, it wants us to transition back to another chord, right? Now, in this case, I think it transitions really well back into G. Just with those 4 chords now, you have, a really solid progression. But wait, we're supposed to learn 6 chords today. So what more are we going to throw into the mix? I'll show you. The next chord we're going to be doing is an F chord. Now that chord tends to freak people out because it's notoriously the toughest chord to play for beginners. But we are going to play a ultra stripped down version of the chord that even you right now on your day 1 of practicing guitar, you'll be able to play, okay? What it is going to require though is a technique called barring, which basically means you're taking one finger and you're using that to hold multiple strings and fret them down, okay? So, but in this case, we're only going to be barring 2 strings. So with our first finger, we're going to be holding down the 1st fret of the B and the E string, right? Those 2 highest strings, just like that. So what really helps is if you're having trouble with really, getting those notes to ring out properly, like that, what really helps is to kind of pinch the guitar with your thumb, behind the neck, kind of like create this pinching motion so that you're actually splitting the force, between both of those fingers so that you don't put all the burden on your index finger to do all the pushing. And so when you do that, you're able to actually find that nice sweet spot and the notes will ring out just fine. We're almost done though. Next, we're going to take our 2nd finger. We're going to put it on the 2nd fret of the G string, okay, right on top of where our 1st finger is. And that's the full F chord, at least the full version of the simplified F chord. Okay, now remember, be sure to really pinch with that thumb. Let the thumb do more work, and that way you'll be able to relieve these 2 fingers. And you'll create the tension needed in order to properly get those notes to resonate, okay? So that is the 5th chord. Now, where we're going to be putting it, I'll go ahead and show you. Now, with all 5 chords so far, so the F chord is kind of like, I think it adds like an extra sort of like element to extend the chord progression. That's why I like to go back to G after playing the C7 chord and then playing F, because for our 6th chord, it actually perfectly segues into the 6th chord we're going to be playing today, which is a D7, yet another transition chord, right? With all these extra transition chords, it kind of extends the life of our chord progression, and that's why you're able to play a 6 chord progression on your, this soon into your guitar playing because of all those 7 chords, So I'm going to play the D7 chord for you right now, and it goes exactly like this. Now, you may have noticed it's pretty much just like the F chord. The only difference is we've just added our 3rd finger here, and we've fretted the 2nd fret on the high E string to create this kind of triangular shape with your fingers. And it creates yet again, that sort of, I want to go somewhere kind of sound, right? This is not a chord you want to end on. But when you play it next to an F chord, not only does it, work super well ergonomically with your fingers, but just sound-wise, it kind of wants to take you in another direction, right? But the direction that we're going to take this is to our 1st chord, the G chord. So basically with all of these chords you're learning today, the G chord is like home base, okay? Like you kind of want to end it on G because that's actually the musical key of this chord progression, you could say. So everything revolves around that first G chord. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and play all 6 chords in succession now for you. All right, and then we're gonna talk about a strumming pattern that you can incorporate to really make this sound musical, okay? Here are all 6 chords right next to each other. So right there on its own, it sounds pretty good. It makes sense musically, okay? So now we're gonna sort of arrange it in a way that will sound like a legit chord progression, okay? So it's basically gonna be in the same order, but I'm gonna make some subtle changes that you'll see and I'll explain that will just kind of make this sound more deliberate as a chord progression, okay? So starting with chord number 1, our G chord, what I wanna do, or what I want you to do, is to strum it 4 times. So just like this. With that simple downward motion with your hand. And we're going to be doing that with pretty much all of the chords, okay, except for a couple. We're going to be strumming them 4 times. So basically we play the G chord 4 times, then the G7 chord 4 times. And then, you guessed it, the C chord 4 times. Going on to the C7 chord, also 4 times. Then we're going to go back to the G chord here. We're going to resolve it a little bit before we go on to the F chord. So we play the G chord 4 more times. Then we're going to play the F chord 2 times. Then the D7 chord 2 times. And finally the G chord once again 4 times. Now I'm going to go ahead and play at at full speed or full tempo or whatever, just to give you an idea of how the whole chord progression will sound. So right there, just a nice, simple chord progression, but it still sounds very musical. It's something that you can practice and play on a loop if you want to, just over and over again, just to get comfortable with making those simple chord transitions. And you'd be surprised after doing that for a while, how it's gonna play into when you start learning full chords, that they're just gonna come to you a lot easier, okay? It just really comes down to just starting really, really minimal, like with the smallest amount you can get away with, right? Like this is literally the smallest G chord you can get away with, but super simple to learn. And I wanted to apply that with all 6 of those chords so that you can basically play a legit chord progression on your own. So I'm going to play it for you one more time, up to speed, and then we'll go through it slowly one more time as far as the strumming patterns, and we'll pretty much be done. You will now be able to play 6 chords in a very musical, fun sounding progression. All right, here we go. Now, I've included in the description box a link to all the reference material for this lesson. It'll have all the chords on there and stuff for you to reference. I've also included in the description box a link to a free practice session cheat sheet that'll basically give you a breakdown of how your practice session should go and really how to get the most out of your practice with the least amount of time. Well, that about does it for this video. That was 6 basic guitar chords made ultra simple. I really hope you've enjoyed this lesson as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. And if you really want to stay up to date with all of our future lessons, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification icon. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video.